Hello, my name is Roger Claxton and welcome to this series of bite-sized talks entitled Poor on the Moor. The talks are in segments and based on the records in the Widecombe archive and the project that commenced in 2011 to digitise and catalogue them. The talks are based on the contents of the recently published book Welfare in Widecombe 1700 to 1900, written by me. You can get a copy through our website widecombe-in-the-moor.com/welfare and various other outlets. There are also ebook versions available. This is the 8th segment of the Poor on the Moor series of talks and explores various other initiatives and provisions that were made, both in terms of money raised and how it was spent. Because of its length, it has been broken down into 2 parts, and this is the second part. We are continuing our look at some miscellaneous provisions that were made. Here we will consider 2 local initiatives, the Rugglestone Friendly Society and the Widecombe Educational Charity, and then finish off with a look at another responsibility of the parish overseers, that of dealing with burials. Move on to friendly societies. The Rugglestone Friendly Society, which was set up in 1836, probably as a result of the new poor laws. As we shall see in the next segment, the Newton Abbot Union was formed in 1836, so about the same time, and this was a friendly society set up by the work people in Widecombe to pay money in regularly, and then if they became sick, then they could claim some relief. We'll just look briefly at some of the rules, a couple of the rules. Here we have Rule 2, that the members are to meet quarterly, and each member who attending will pay an entrance fee, and they will get a pint of beer. So everybody that turned up at the meeting got a pint of beer, and this prompted Charles Vancouver to be concerned that some regulation should be made to restrain these men from an indulgence which often ends in drunkenness. So perhaps he thought there wasn't just 1 pint of beer, but several during the evening. There we go. And then no pauper would receive any benefit from this society. So it was clearly not intended to be a society for paupers. They had their own system of relief, and this was not the same thing at all. And then we can move on to the educational charity, which was formed sometime in the late 1700s, probably certainly before 1796, to enable poor children in the parish to receive some education. As we know, they're going to be apprenticed out by the age of 8 or 9 in 1816, so there wasn't much time for education. They should get at least a few years before that. And I guess that hadn't happened before this charity was set up. Schools were all private at that time, and so pupils had to pay to attend. So clearly, if a poor child they couldn't afford to pay the cost, then the child could not attend, and that's where the charity stepped in. And we just look at this extract from the accounts, which names the children at the different schools, and we'll just look at Anne Smurden, who had a school at Venton. She had 10 pupils, and various pupils listed here and admitted at different times. And there's James Lehman with no entry against him, and you can see why in a moment. Unfortunately, James Lehman is noted here as dead. Jane Lehman is removed. We don't say why she's removed. Sally Lehman and Sarah Potter have been removed to Widecombe Town School. In other words, this is another local school, and this is the school that operates from some of the rooms in the church house, the same building that some of the poor will reside in. And then here we can see that Mary Andrews, who started to attend in February 1794, has left because she's now apprenticed to Sylvester Mann. There were a number of these schools around Widdicombe, all private affairs, probably one room allocated as a schoolroom and run by one or perhaps two people, which led to them being called dame schools. You can find out more about these schools in an interesting paper which you can find at widdicombearchive.org.uk/welfare, and also Mary Stanbrook's book Old Dartmoor Schools Remembered. Interesting to note that this charity is still in existence today. So let's quickly look at an example of a burial. The overseers were responsible for burials of the poor, and also in another interesting situation where a body was encountered on the moor, which did happen from time to time. In this particular case, the case of Thomas Greep, they knew the person's name because he was a local person, but that isn't always the case. But let's just quickly go through this to see that, again, the expenses associated with finding a body. So paid for the coroner's fee, 13 shillings and 4pence. Paid John Smurden of Rowden for riding to Exeter to fetch the coroner, 5 shillings. Paid in expenses at Widdicombe Town where the coroner was here. So in other words, when the coroner was here. So obviously when he arrives, you have to look after him, 3 shillings. Paid in expenses when Thomas Greep's goods were sold. That's the cost of holding the sale. Paid for 2 men to watch by Thomas Greep after he was found dead for 2 days. Each man 1 shilling a day, comes to 4 shillings. And for 3 men to watch by him by night for 2 nights at 1 shillings and 6pence each man each night, comes to 9 shillings. And then paid Roger Hannaford for the seams of wood which was burnt by the watchman. So the watchman needed a fire and you had to pay for the wood. And for straw made use of by the watchman. So the watchman needed straw, perhaps to lie on or whatever. Anyway, altogether, that comes to £3, 17 shillings and 6pence, a not inconsiderable sum. So that concludes the 8th segment, which I hope has given you some idea of some of the other initiatives and provisions made for the poor and for the parishioners. Please stay with us for the next segment, which discusses the Newton Abbot Union. Thanks for listening.
Requiem eternal, Requiem eternal, Dona eis Requiem along the only way. From Bellevere to Lidford Town,